All
Good
right.
morning, lovely webinar attendees.
Good morning to our early joiners. Okay, so why don't we get started, because I want to make sure we have time for all the questions that I've got for you, and then people will join as they're able to. Okay. So, like I said, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Rob McQuillan. I'm an urban planner in training here at Smart Density, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Mayor John Bauters from Emeryville, California. Mayor Bauters serves as the chair of both the Alameda County Transportation Commission and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, where he has been a progressive voice for sustainable land use, especially for active transportation for people-oriented communities. John has over 20 years of experience as a nonprofit professional and legal aid attorney for at-risk populations. He's an animal lover, a cyclist, a long-distance hiker, and most of all, he loves helping other people discover the joy of active transportation and being outdoors. Welcome to you, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me today, Rob.
Thrilled to have you here. So while Smart Density's work knows no borders, we are a Toronto-based firm, and I know that you were recently in our city. So let's start here. How was your trip to Toronto, and what was your impression of our city?
Okay, my impressions. The straight up honest is, one, you're a very big city. Two, you have a lot of very lovely people. I met some amazing bike advocates, people who were, I spent an afternoon doing bike brigade, doing food delivery to food insecure folks in the community. I also had a bike ride on Sunday morning, and Robin Richardson and Lanrick, your Toronto bike mayor, were really kind enough to help coordinate a ride. There were a ton of amazing people there. Ice cream was had. It was a lot of fun. It's really kind of the root of why I do some of this, is to just get people together and have them collectively experience joy. So my impression of people were extremely hospitable and kind and lovely. My impression of your infrastructure is car sewer. It was a car sewer. I stayed on Yonge Street and I hated it. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like drag racing at night, like speeding everywhere. People are really impatient to make a right turn while pedestrians are in a crosswalk. I was somewhat alarmed growing up in Michigan in the Midwest. There were some sensibilities back in the Great Lakes country, and I was surprised at how impatient I thought Toronto drivers were. Yeah.
I definitely hear you, and we're on our way, but we're not quite there yet. And I know that you've been an advocate for active transportation, particularly in your role as mayor of Emeryville. And we have lots to learn from you, I think. So I'm wondering, as it pertains to active transportation, how have you advanced that vision in your own context? And what lessons have you learned along the way? And maybe what could we learn from that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who say, well, what does a 1 square mile city with 13,000 residents have to teach anyone? It's a common question I get, not so much from the Bay Area, but from people who like Google Emeryville to see like, well, what would we learn from this town? We're kind of smack dab. So if you're not familiar with this, we're wedged between Oakland and Berkeley on the Bayfront, and we're the eastern foot of the Bay Bridge across from San Francisco. So we're an extremely dense urban core. Our daytime population swells to almost 40,000 people between employees and visitors. And so we have a significant amount of economic activity going on in our city, but also just people movement going on in our city. So it's not a new thing for us as a community to be innovators and leaders in transportation space. And what we learned several decades ago when we were really growing as a community first was that there's a need to, with limited amount of space in a 1 square mile city, you have to be really innovative about how you move people, how you build housing, how you balance and sustain the community you're living in. So I don't think that what we're doing is different than large cities. We just do it at our own scale. We build at our own scale, and it's very comparable to large cities in many ways. The biggest thing we learned is that cars are not a solution. There's a finite limit on what can be accomplished with car-oriented spaces, and they actually take away from the city. They take away livability. They take away air quality, both in the form of pollution, but noise as well. They take up space and they take up social time, and they're also a huge economic drain on the city in terms of public works resources for maintenance issues. So we've done several things as innovators. One, we have a free transit system in our city. So every property in the city pays into something called the PBID, which is our property-based improvement district, parcel-based improvement district. And from that, we fund a nonprofit management association called the Emeryville Transportation Management Authority. And they manage a service called the Emery-Go-Round. And it's 3 routes. It's a shuttle service. It's a last mile connector to regional rail and BART, which is our subway system and commuter train system out here. And we, in a city of 12,000 people in 2018, had 1.2 million rider trips in 1 square mile. So if you think about that, the accessibility of affordable and reliable transit, especially for last mile services, is critical to taking cars off the road. Pair that with the fact that a lot of other people will want to go places that the routes don't go even. So we have a very aggressive active transportation plan. We're actually in the process of finalizing the most recent update to it. I'm very excited for it to come out because we will be removing entire street in the plan. We will be taking lots of street parking away, which is my favorite thing to do, and turning it into active transit space. And what we've seen with the projects we've done a handful of these in the last couple of years, is that people really take to them. And we get the feedback in a small community directly from residents who say, I no longer drive my 2 kids in an SUV to childcare. We get in a cargo bike and go. Well, here I had a couple of families email me and say, we live in these cities that are within 1 to 10 miles from us. They say, we're retiring, we want to be car free, we're moving to your city, any recommendations? We have businesses that want to come to our city because they are thinking forward. The IKEA has asked me to work with them on piloting cargo bike delivery in the United States in Emeryville, out of their Emeryville IKEA. So like we're innovating space, and when you give space to things other than cars, you actually get momentum and movement on that. It wasn't always easy. It's not always easy. We do have people who complain about those things, but largely the feedback we've received is overwhelmingly positive, and we do it with a smile on our face and encourage people to be part of the ride. And it's been a lot of fun.
So I feel like your town slogan or city slogan could be Emeryville small but mighty, because it sounds like there's a ton going on in a small.
That is the slogan. That is the slogan.
Wow.
That's what I say at everything. Every time we have a groundbreaking, I go small but mighty. Welcome to Emeryville.
Okay, well, I'm really glad we're on the same page about that. So one of the things that we know well is that when it comes to how people move around the places that they live, it's really closely entangled with how they live, where they live, what types of dwellings they live in, to have that transit-oriented community, people-oriented community. So I'm also interested in, and I know that you guys have done a ton on housing too, what creative approaches you've taken to add housing supply in your city and how that fits into the active transportation. And then again, what lessons you've learned that maybe we could take and apply to our own context.
Yeah, housing. So most people know me for transportation because of my roles and my outspoken role in transportation, but actually housing is my favorite thing to work on. And we do a number of things. So you have to be, if you're a city, you have to be really engaged in policies that lock in the best things for equitability. So we do a number of things on the private market rate housing development side. Lots of cities will be in this business of developer comes in and proposes a market rate project, and then either the planning commission or the city council or the mayor or all of those things try to extract all these concessions. And it's this really like fraught negotiation over several years. Even they go back and forth on appeals. If you're in San Francisco or some of these other neighboring cities, they go back and forth forever. We just dropped it in the code. We're like, this is what you have to do. You want to get something beyond the by right development of the by right density and FAR and height and all that thing, and people need to build bigger buildings in our city in order for them to be profitable because of the cost of building in our area. So we have really low by right. And then we're like, welcome to our bonus point system. You can have 180 feet of height, or you can have, density of 3.0. You can have all kinds of things that you want. But we say, welcome to our point system, and the first half of the points have to be inclusionary affordable housing, and it has to be at affordability levels that match our regional housing need allocation. So we get moderate income, low income, very low income, and extremely low income housing built right alongside market rate housing in the project as part of the project. And the other half of the points go to a community benefit program. And there's a list of about 8 things that the developer can do to get the other half of the points. We actually just voted out our newest one. So our newest one is that if you construct your building completely of cross-laminated timber, you get all the points. So we're trying to promote carbon sequestration and environmental forward design. We're the first city in California to adopt a local ordinance. It just changed in our building code statewide on July 1st, and we put it on our very first agenda to go out and say, you want to build cross-laminated timber structure, do it in Emeryville. So we put all of our environmental and transportation and housing goals in our development code right there. So there's no negotiating, really. It's just kind of like, here's what you can expect when you come. And developers want predictability. But on the other side, there's only going to be our affordability requirement goes to about 20 to 25%. So you're not going to build as much affordable housing as you build market rate housing if you only rely on the market. So in 2018, we decided we would become market players. So we ran an affordable housing bond, $50 million for a town of 12,000 people. It's the highest per capita affordable housing bond in the state of California. And voters overwhelmingly approved it. About almost 75% of the voters here voted to tax themselves. And we created over the last few years an expenditure plan, and we took every city-owned property that remains that is got a residential zoning to it, and we developed a plan to put affordable housing on it. So essentially, we're building social housing, but partnering with the nonprofit developer community. And so we've been putting out RFPs. We're going to have one that's permanent supportive housing for the homeless. It's a whole city block. We have one that's going to be intergenerational housing for seniors. We actually got the state law change so we could add 20% of those units for foster youth who age out of foster care and don't have a permanent place to live. We have several family affordable housing complexes. And one of my favorites is actually this little tiny parcel we own that we bought a long time ago that we're going to turn into reentry housing for people returning from jail so that they have a place to land in the community. And it's going to be located right next door to a place that has apprenticeship and trades job opportunities for them, so they can go right into a trades program. So we're kind of doing a whole bunch of those things, but we also have other policies. We only ground lease property we own. We don't ever give it away. We have a landlord tenant protection ordinance. We have a whole bunch of other protections in place to prevent the displacement of people, because it's really important that when you build, that you build for everybody. And that also includes placekeeping. So a portion of our bond is actually used to rehabilitate existing market rate housing that's naturally affordable so that people in it can stay there. And the deal is we will give money, like interest-free loans, to the property owner to rehab in exchange for covenants that keep the property at affordable below market rate levels in the market for the families that live there. We're the only city in the East Bay that each of the last two censuses increased its African-American population. While most of the Bay Area saw a massive decline in people of color, people come to us because they're like, how are you building as much as you build, and you're also increasing your Black population? And we do that by building equitably. And that's the key to everything that we do.
Again, small but mighty, that's the theme here. And one of the things that you mentioned was kind of the developers like to have the certainty that you are providing. What has been the relationship in general with the developers and the municipal side of things in the provision of this housing that you're talking about? And how is that response, what's been the response on their end?
Yeah, so every time you propose something, and we know better than anyone else, we went out with we have the highest minimum wage in the nation. We've come out with a lot of things that, we don't really make the radar because we're so small, but we come out first. So our town hall will be full of people who say the sky is going to fall. And that happened with the development system and the requirement for affordable housing. Developers showed up and they're like, we'll never build here again. We're like, okay, cool. Like, we were like, that's fine. You won't build here again. Following week, new application. Following week, new application. So what we've demonstrated is that, yes, it's workable. A lot of what you're doing is you're taking away some level of profitability from them, but we haven't made it financially infeasible. They still find ways. They still want to make money. They still find ways to do it. And what we kind of gambled on was that if you give it to them predictably, right? And we streamline the process, right? So we try to make review as administrative as possible. And when their timeline goes from 3 years in San Francisco to 8 months in Emeryville, it's like, okay, the amount of money that's lost over those other 2+ years in the process elsewhere is offset by having the predictability of knowing, okay, I have to build affordable housing. And is that really bad? No, it's not really bad. In fact, the city manages those affordable units. They build them, they turn them over to us. We run the admissions program. So like we don't have a problem, but every time we start something, there's a lot of people who come in and say, nobody will do this again. You're making a terrible decision. The problem with all those folks doing that is now they've basically given us the playbook. We now know that's just the song they sing. And so we're really undeterred when it comes to progressive policies, because nothing that has been forecast on any of the things we've done has ever actually played out the way people said it would. It's actually played out to the opposite. We're 10 years ahead of schedule on our greenhouse gas reductions program, our climate action 2.0. We're supposed to be at 40% reduction of our 2005 baseline by 2030. We're hitting 42% this October. We moved the whole city to renewable energy this March or April. We voted on it. And so like, we're just doing it. And a lot of people will tell you can't do it or no, or they'll give you all these concerns and reasons. That's not how it usually plays out.
This really makes me think about the fact that change is hard, but change is possible. And it's possible for everybody involved, regardless of, which corner you're coming at it from. And I think switching gears a little bit towards the community side of things, you must, in your work, run into people that have opposing views, whose support you need. And I'm wondering how you communicate with those people. I'm thinking, the NIMBYism and or whether it's the NIMBYs or the drivers that are super powerful and have loud voices. How do you communicate with those people, and how do you build a consensus when there's a bit of opposition?
Well, it depends on the type of NIMBYism, to be honest with you. So a classic example in the space for streets, I give this explanation to a lot of bike advocates who say, how are you getting bike lanes? Don't you have opposition? Yes, we do. Absolutely. We have a main road that's an arterial that goes across the whole northern part of our county called San Pablo Avenue. It's a state highway. It's 4 travel lanes, a center turn lane, and 2 parking lanes, right? So it's about 75 feet wide across. It's a straight line straight out from downtown Oakland to the county border. And I'm leading the regional discussion for the 4 cities that it straddles to convert that into a complete street with BRT on it, with removing all the parking lanes and putting in protected cycle lanes, because it's a direct corridor to downtown. So we'd enhance transit times, enhance active transportation opportunity use, and de-emphasize the car on this road. About 70 people wrote or called in and opposed the proposal that we had at the meeting. And I had a lady who was really upset, and she made it really clear to me that she would never shop in my city again. She said, I come to get I forget if it was her hair or her nails. She comes to see a beautician in our city on San Pablo Avenue. And she's like, I park in front of your building, the building there in your city. And she's like, I'm going to be totally inconvenienced by the parking on that street. There's almost none to begin with in front of the building, and I'm going to have to go somewhere else, and that's going to be a huge inconvenience. And I just feel like this is a terrible decision you're making. And are you really thinking about the businesses and the lost revenue in your city? And what I tell people is, we often confront people who are giving you their feelings with facts, and that's actually not the conversation we should have. Like, if people come to you with facts and you have also got facts, and there's just a principled disagreement about, well, what do we do with these conflicting facts? Our priorities are in conflict, right? That's where you can have a conversation with facts. But if you're coming with the planet is burning, and by the way, did you know that bicyclists make 4 times as many trips to stores as car owners? And so overall, they actually purchase more in a month than a car owner does, because they also have more dispensable income. And oh, by the way, like, if you give them all the facts, this is what they hear, because they don't really care about the facts. They've come with their feelings. So I talk to people who speak with their feelings with my feelings. And what I find is that my goal is not to change their heart or mind. I never go with that objective. It's to simply illustrate to all the other open-minded people who are watching or participating in the meeting where I'm coming from in a way that doesn't disrespect the person who speaks to me. So she has these feelings, right? And I say, I hear you feel inconvenienced. I hear you feel this will harm our economy. I hear you feel that this is not necessary because nobody bikes on San Pablo. Well, what I feel is people don't bike on San Pablo probably because it's not safe. It's a massive car speedway, basically. What I feel is that children should be able to have safe routes to school. What I believe is that moms and dads should come home from work alive if they choose to move to work by something other than their car. And to me, I understand you feel inconvenienced, but to me, when I prioritize the decisions I have to make on behalf of our whole community, right, your convenience is secondary to the safety of everybody. Everyone's safety is more important as a collective goal for the city than it is about the convenience of some mode users over others. You've made a choice and you're entitled to it. other people want to make choices that are equitable to themselves and their own life situation. And everyone deserves to be safe with those choices. And that's how I make the decision. And they may still disagree with me and not like it, and they may not shop in my city, but that's not my concern. My concern is everyone's safety. My concern is ending road deaths. My concern is that people have meaningful alternatives, and that the planet and the climate in my community is healthier and safer as a result of it. So I'm unapologetic about that. That's what most people know me for. Authentically, always just this is why I'm doing that. And I don't really challenge or confront people. I just share with them back how I feel.
Yeah, that's a great point that you make, because there's lots of facts to substantiate why certain urban interventions are, the best route forward, but really changes in the way that we move around, changes in the way that we live are feelings based. I mean, that's something that we have to navigate as human beings. So I think it's a really useful, likely communication strategy, and something that a lot of us can think about. I have tons more questions for you, so I could go on all day, but I know that our audience also has some questions, and some have been coming in here right now. So I'm gonna switch over to audience Q&A. So if you have questions out there, make sure you type them into the Q&A section, and I'll pull them out in our last few remaining minutes. So I have a question here about whether you think the missing middle is also missing the middle class as potential partners in providing affordable housing. So I think the question there is, how can the middle class really be involved in advancing this notion of the missing middle and infill and intensification on sites that already exist, to, I suppose, support the missing middle, or support the middle class, but also those who need affordable housing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We in the United States, and I'm sure it's probably not too different in Canada, we don't recognize that we're constantly in a state of class warfare. It really is. It's really true. Like the way everything is set up is to essentially assist several billionaires who basically allow us to play culture wars and class wars with one another over, at least you're not poor, right? Well, at least I have a job and I'm not poor. And then what happens is we've got these archaic structures. Zoning in our country, it's even more blatant than in Canada, but these really racist structures that we've kind of just we continue to work from, that really like zoning, should just be gutted from the way they work, because they essentially perpetuate these problems. So you're fighting, to the question, the really good question, you're fighting about whether missing middle housing, like duplexes and quadplexes, can be, dropped into single family home neighborhoods that are exclusionary. And what is this doing? Oh, the height of this building, the number of people, the traffic and parking demands, all the things that people who are established, who've already got theirs, come up with as these are barriers to it. And then the question is to how do these families, these middle income families, participate and also include affordability? That's a really hard question to answer. I think that one of the problems we have is that most middle income families don't have the time to engage their government, right? They're like working people. They work, they have families, they have children, they have social and familial obligations. And I remember that every time I go to a public meeting and I look out, and the people who are telling me that whatever we're proposing or reviewing that given day is terrible, it's like, okay, this is a same cohort of people who are of a higher level of income or wealth, who have established property ownership that's often been for 30 to 45 years here. And right, are they really reflective of both the full community on the whole and the need? And then how do we ally middle income people and lower income people? We, in our city, we kind of, like I said, we removed that barrier. Something I didn't mention, but is going to be in our housing element, which we're completing, is due by January to the state. It's an 8-year plan for how you're going to build all the housing that the state is allocated, the region is allocated to you. We're going for a pro housing designation. We're one of a few cities in California that's trying to hit 150% of our goal. And one of the things we're doing is we're eliminating single family zoning. We're just eliminating it. We're going to essentially say, and that's how you, from a leadership perspective, that's how you ally those communities together. We've already got this obligation to build affordable housing. Okay, developer, you want to turn a single family home into a quadplex? Great. It has an affordability requirement, but it's also going to be adding housing and density that allows for access and greater accessibility in the market to middle income families. So I do think this is a good question, because it kind of goes to the need to have a series of policies and to be more holistic. We upzoned our transit corridors, for example, a few years ago. But I believe upzoning shouldn't be limited to large streets. Like upzoning should happen elsewhere too. It shouldn't be like we have these bucolic little neighborhoods that are insulated and exclusionary. We actually need to do that throughout the whole city. And there are ways to do that. As to how to like organize or ally market, middle class and affordable housing occupants or homeowners or tenants, together and their interests together. I think it's going back to this like higher level meta conversation about what does it mean to be equitable, right? And the fact that like that literally means making sure that we have made space and belonging for everybody. And so then identifying the gaps in your policies, right? So if we don't have a policy that allows for the missing middle housing to be built, why don't we? How are we going to accomplish that? We allow ADUs. We like I said, we're going to quadplexing everywhere. Like we're going to do the things in that policy space that we see best accomplishing that, and there'll be future opportunities to develop and grow in that policy space. But getting that started, I think, is part of it, and it's about coming back to like is everybody welcome here? Does everybody have the chance to belong here? And if not, what is the barrier to that?
Absolutely, and some of those things that you mentioned sound transformative in the ability to add the missing middle to some of these single family zone neighborhoods, which in your case in the future won't be anymore, single family zone neighborhoods. And that can benefit both the middle class and those seeking affordable housing. So it's really interesting work that you're doing. I think I'm keeping my eye on the clock, but I think we can squeeze in one more question. So I have a question here about how you work with the other Bay Area municipalities when you're executing your initiatives.
It depends on the type of initiative. We've never been afraid to kind of just go out. Other cities can get a little tied up in the bureaucratic process, and we find that a lot of them end up doing things that we've done several years after we've done them. So we're a little on the trend setting side. Berkeley is trend setting as well, I would say, on some things that we both kind of like, we seesaw back and forth who's going to kind of do this first. When it comes to working with other municipalities, I enjoy a really positive relationship with the other mayors in my county. There are 14 cities in Alameda County, and I'm friends with every mayor in my county, the mayors in the neighboring counties as well. And so I field a ton of questions from electeds. I get them once a month, probably from someone in Southern California too, about how did we do this or what did we do and why. And it's really just about like, I just share all the materials. I'm like, here's what we did, here's what we reviewed, here's what the public said, here's how we made changes or addressed that issue. And just really being an information bank, because we do realize that we're ahead. Like we passed cannabis regulations before cannabis was legal in California, anticipating it would become legal, so that when it became legal, we already had all the regulations in place, and we did like an open permit application process. We gave out 2 permits. We had tons of businesses apply to be here. We tend to like start stuff, and we can, I think, because we have a really progressive council that's unified. Like the 5 of us just really worked well together, and there's no ego. It's like we're all in to do this together, and we move forward. So I think people see that about us as well, and so it makes people don't feel threatened by what we do. People are like, sometimes they're like, oh, Emeryville can just do whatever it wants, probably, but people like see how we work together, and they want to be part of that because we're generally really united and positive about our vision for the city, and people want to be part of something like that. So it has been my relationship with other elected officials. There are people who don't want to do things the way we do it, and I rarely will I like actually get into an argument with somebody about that, unless I feel like they're actually attacking it unfairly, and then I'll actually debate them. I'm like, well, let's actually talk about why you misappropriated what it is we're doing. But normally it's just a lifting up and staying focused on positive messaging and letting people decide for themselves, because the public wants what we're doing, and so we don't feel a need to defend it to other cities. We're like, whatever, people want what we're doing. So
that's awesome. Okay, so we're at 11:31 Eastern, which is 8:31 Pacific, and you have a long day ahead of you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna apologize to the people in the chat whose questions I didn't get to. I could go on all day, but I won't. I want to respect everyone's time. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you for joining us today. We will continue to follow what's going on in Emeryville. Small but mighty is going to be in my head for the rest of the day. And thank you again for sharing your insight with us. Thank you everyone for joining, and we hope this was valuable.
Thanks for coming, everybody who came.
Okay, everyone, take care. Thanks again, and watch our communications for our next webinar.